The press briefing room had hosted countless confrontations over the years, but none quite like this. Under the harsh glare of studio lights, the air vibrated with expectation, a low hum of anticipation rolling across the rows of journalists packed shoulder to shoulder. Camera shutters snapped in quick succession, red recording lights blinked to life, and the familiar rhythm of keys clacking echoed like rain against glass. At the podium stood President Donald Trump, squared shoulders, chin lifted, projecting the confidence of a man long accustomed to commanding attention. He spoke with practiced ease about economic victories, international leverage, and political strength, his voice alternating between boastful certainty and sharp-edged humor. It was the performance everyone expected, controlled, loud, and unapologetically self-assured. Questions came in rapid succession, predictable and routine, until the energy in the room subtly changed. Conversations hushed. Heads turned. A ripple of disbelief swept across the press corps as a figure stepped into view from the side entrance. Barack Obama, former president, walked forward with unhurried composure, his presence instantly altering the atmosphere. He didn't announce himself. He didn't demand attention. He didn't need to. The room fell silent on its own. Obama's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the charged environment, his posture relaxed yet deliberate, eyes focused, expression unreadable. He took a position near the podium, close enough to feel the tension radiating from Trump, yet distant enough to command his own gravity. No one had expected this. Reporters glanced at one another, unsure whether to speak or simply observe history unfolding. Trump paused mid-sentence, briefly glancing sideways, his expression tightening just enough to betray surprise before settling back into guarded control. The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate, until a reporter finally broke it with a question aimed directly at Obama, one loaded with implication, controversy, and narrative weight. The question wasn't shouted. It was asked calmly, almost clinically, which made it land harder. It referenced accusations, disputes, and unanswered doubts that had lived on the fringes of political rumor for years. Trump immediately seized the moment, dismissing it with familiar rhetoric, calling it theater, distraction, fabrication, his voice rising, hands gesturing sharply as he sought to reclaim dominance. He spoke fast, louder with each sentence, framing the moment as another media ambush, another attempt to undermine him. Yet Obama didn't react. He didn't interrupt. He waited. When he finally spoke, his voice was level, controlled, and unmistakably firm. He addressed Trump directly, not with insults or bravado, but with measured clarity. He spoke of facts, of responsibility, of the difference between noise and truth. The contrast was stark. Trump's intensity filled the room like static, while Obama's calm cut through it like a steady signal. Reporters leaned forward instinctively, sensing the shift. This was no longer a routine press conference. It was a collision of styles, legacies, and philosophies. The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate, until a reporter finally broke it with a question aimed directly at Obama, one loaded with implication, controversy, and narrative weight. The question wasn't shouted. It was asked calmly, almost clinically, which made it land harder. It referenced accusations, disputes, and unanswered doubts that had lived on the fringes of political rumor for years. Trump immediately seized the moment, dismissing it with familiar rhetoric, calling it theater, distraction, fabrication, his voice rising, hands gesturing sharply as he sought to reclaim dominance. He spoke fast, louder with each sentence, framing the moment as another media ambush, another attempt to undermine him. Yet Obama didn't react. He didn't interrupt. He waited. When he finally spoke, his voice was level, controlled, and unmistakably firm. He addressed Trump directly, not with insults or bravado, but with measured clarity. He spoke of facts, of responsibility, of the difference between noise and truth. The contrast was stark. Trump's intensity filled the room like static, while Obama's calm cut through it like a steady signal. Reporters leaned forward instinctively, sensing the shift. This was no longer a routine press conference. It was a collision of styles, legacies, and philosophies. Trump pushed back harder, framing the exchange as personal attacks, insisting there was nothing to answer, nothing to prove. But Obama remained unmoved, his words deliberate, his pauses intentional. Each sentence landed not as an attack, but as an invitation, to clarify, to confront, to be transparent. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Trump, used to controlling the rhythm, found himself reacting instead of leading. And as Obama continued, it became clear that this was only the opening movement of a much larger confrontation, one that would not rely on volume or spectacle, but on pressure applied patiently, relentlessly, until deflection was no longer enough. The tension that settled after Obama's opening remarks did not fade, it thickened, coiling through the room like an unseen force. Trump, sensing the shift but refusing to yield ground, leaned back into the microphone with renewed intensity, his voice sharpening as he attempted to reclaim control. He spoke of distractions, of political games, of people clinging to relevance by manufacturing controversy. His words came faster now, layered with frustration, each sentence louder than the last, as though volume itself could reassert authority. Fingers pointed. Shoulders stiffened. The familiar rhythm of dominance was there, but something underneath it had changed. Obama did not match the energy. He did not mirror the aggression. Instead, he waited until the noise burned itself out, then stepped forward just slightly, enough to signal that he was about to speak, not over Trump, but through him. His tone remained even, almost conversational, yet it carried unmistakable weight. He spoke of leadership not as performance but as responsibility, of truth not as a weapon but as a duty. Where Trump painted the moment as spectacle, Obama reframed it as consequence. He spoke slowly, allowing silence to do some of the work, forcing every ear in the room to stay locked on him. The reporters felt it immediately, the way the exchange was no longer about winning headlines, but about who could withstand scrutiny without flinching. Trump interrupted, dismissing the idea that he owed anyone explanations, insisting that personal matters were off-limits, that the media had no right to pry. But Obama didn't challenge the interruption directly. Instead, he acknowledged it calmly, then dismantled it piece by piece. He spoke of public trust, of the implicit contract between power and transparency, of how leadership demanded consistency between words and actions. Each point was delivered without accusation, which made it harder to swat away. Trump paced slightly behind the podium, shaking his head, muttering rebuttals under his breath before launching into another defensive monologue. Yet the more he spoke, the more reactive he appeared. The cameras caught it, the tightening jaw, the restless shifting, the cadence slipping from confident to strained. Obama, by contrast, seemed anchored, his posture unchanged, his gaze steady, as though he had expected every response before it was given. He reminded the room that deflection did not erase doubt, that repetition did not replace evidence, that calling something false did not make it so. The reporters leaned in further now, pens hovering, some forgetting to write at all. This wasn't a shouting match, it was an erosion. Trump tried again to pivot, listing achievements, invoking loyalty, asserting strength. Obama allowed it, then responded not by disputing accomplishments, but by returning to the same unresolved point with quiet persistence. The effect was surgical. Each time Trump attempted to escape the frame, Obama gently but firmly brought him back. The exchange began to feel less like a debate and more like pressure building inside a sealed room. The audience could sense it. Trump was fighting the moment, while Obama was letting it unfold. And slowly, unmistakably, the balance of power in the room tilted. Not because one man shouted louder, but because one man no longer needed to. By the time the exchange reached its third movement, the room itself seemed to have taken a side, not through applause or interruption, but through stillness. The murmurs were gone. Even the camera shutters slowed, as if the operators sensed that noise would break something fragile and volatile forming between the two men. Trump, visibly irritated by the loss of momentum, attempted to reassert dominance with sharper language, framing the moment as an attack not just on him but on the office he occupied. He spoke of respect, of boundaries, of how leadership required decisiveness rather than endless questioning. Yet the words rang hollow against the calm precision that followed. Obama responded not by contradicting Trump outright, but by reframing the entire confrontation. He spoke about accountability as something inseparable from authority, about how the higher the position, the thinner the margin for secrecy. His voice never rose, yet each sentence landed with deliberate weight, pressing deeper into the unresolved core of the dispute. He spoke about how unanswered questions grow louder over time, how refusal becomes its own kind of answer, and how leaders are often judged less by what they deny than by what they refuse to clarify. Trump bristled, interjecting with dismissive laughter and curt denials, insisting that repetition did not transform speculation into truth. But Obama didn't chase the denial. He let it hang, then spoke again, this time shifting the tone subtly, drawing the focus away from politics and toward legacy. He talked about how moments like these outlive headlines, how children grow up watching how power responds to pressure, how silence in the face of doubt can echo louder than any defense. The room felt the shift immediately. This was no longer about policy, elections, or even rivalry. It was about character under scrutiny. Trump reacted sharply, accusing Obama of moral grandstanding, of exploiting optics, of pretending to care while playing a longer game. His voice cracked slightly as frustration seeped through the bravado, the cadence uneven now, the confidence strained. Obama listened without interruption, then replied with the same steady composure, acknowledging the accusation without validating it, returning again to the idea that transparency is not a favor granted at convenience but an obligation carried at all times. He spoke about how leadership demands consistency, how truth cannot be selective, how credibility erodes not in dramatic collapses but in small, repeated evasions. The reporters felt it, the slow tightening of the narrative around Trump, the way each attempted escape only reinforced the frame Obama had set. Pen scratched furiously again. Cameras zoomed in. Trump tried one last time to pivot toward strength, toward accomplishments, toward defiance, but the energy no longer followed him. The room was listening elsewhere now. Obama's calm had become the center of gravity, drawing every unanswered question into its orbit. And as he paused, letting silence stretch just long enough to feel intentional, it was clear he was preparing to cross a final line, not with outrage, but with a question designed not to accuse, but to compel an answer. The final moments unfolded not with a bang, but with a hush so complete it felt orchestrated, as though the room itself understood what was about to happen and leaned in to listen. Trump stood rigid behind the podium, jaw set, eyes scanning the sea of faces that no longer mirrored his energy. The confidence that had once filled the space now hovered uncertainly, caught between defiance and fatigue. Obama, sensing the weight of the moment, did not rush it. He allowed the silence to stretch just long enough to become uncomfortable, transforming it into a mirror that reflected every unanswered deflection back onto the speaker who had offered them. When he finally spoke, his voice remained calm, almost gentle, but carried a gravity that eclipsed everything that had come before. He did not accuse. He did not dramatize. He asked a question, simple in structure, devastating in implication, about transparency, about why clarity is resisted when it has the power to settle doubt, about how truth, when freely offered, strengthens leadership rather than weakens it. The question was not framed around rumor or spectacle, but around principle. If confidence is genuine, why fear verification? If honesty is certain, why resist openness? The effect was immediate. Trump opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, searching for a familiar pivot that refused to present itself. He spoke briefly, defensively, insisting that not every demand deserved satisfaction, that authority required boundaries, that leadership was not a performance for public approval. But the words landed without force, dissolving into the stillness they sought to conquer. Obama did not counter with argument. He simply nodded once, acknowledging the response without endorsing it, then addressed the room rather than the man. He spoke about history's memory, about how moments of pressure define reputations more than moments of applause, about how trust is earned not by controlling narratives but by releasing them. He reminded the audience, quietly, firmly, that leadership is ultimately measured by willingness to stand in the light without flinching. The reporters felt it as a closing chapter rather than a cliffhanger. Cameras captured Trump's silence, the subtle shift of weight from one foot to the other, the tension that no slogan could relieve. Obama stepped back, signaling completion rather than victory, and in doing so reclaimed the moral center of the exchange without ever declaring it his own. As the briefing drew to an end, the room remained subdued, journalists slow to move, aware they had witnessed something rarer than confrontation, a moment where volume failed and composure prevailed. When Obama finally turned and walked away, there was no flourish, no acknowledgement of triumph, only the quiet certainty of a question left unanswered, hanging in the air like a final note unresolved. The conference ended, the lights dimmed, and the room emptied, but the silence lingered, carrying with it a truth as old as power itself. When clarity is withheld, doubt speaks louder, and history remembers who chose noise, and who chose truth.